Today we are joined by Val Prisecaru. Gosh, I screwed that whole thing up. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to start that whole intro again. I'm sorry about that, everybody. Hi, I am Dr. Jason Bradley, and I'm joined today with my co-host James Chester and our executive producer Rachel Bradley. And we are joined today for Get Better Faster by Val Prisecaru, a precision health practitioner and nutrition scientist with over 25 years of experience. Val is literally helping people rewrite their health history through their genes. Val holds a master's degree in food science and human nutrition from the University of Illinois and is finishing his doctorate in health sciences in nutrigenomics and multi-omics. I can't wait to find out what that is. And Val's been on the forefront of genomics revolution in healthcare. He's the mastermind behind groundbreaking protocols, including, and this is big, the world's first genomics-based SARS-CoV-2 risk assessment, also revolutionary addiction recovering protocols using your genetic data, and cutting edge weight management strategies that work with your DNA instead of against it. As senior director of R&D for EcoNugenics and genomics consultant for Designs for Health, one of the companies that we love, he's literally changing how we approach personalized medicine. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly maintain their health while others struggle despite doing, quote, everything right, Val is about to blow your mind, and ours too, with the science of precision genetics. Val, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jason and James. Good to see you guys again. It's been a little while. We should do this more often for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the banter before the show was really classy, and we learned a lot about the field of work that you're in and going for your doctorate and trying to find words that rhyme with food.
Yeah, that's just the wildest thing. That my 14-year-old daughter came up to me and she's like, "You know what doesn't rhyme with food?" Which is pretty much every word. I'm like, "That is the funniest thing I heard. I have to share that with someone."
That's great.
I put it in my phone. I have like a little list of really hilarious things for my daughters and my wife, and I like things that we say because you forget, right?
Right.
Something could be like the funniest thing. You'll laugh for 5 minutes, and then 3 days later, you don't remember it. You don't write it down. So it's important for posterity.
Man, I'll tell you what. I know everyone complains about social media, but I like social media because it brings up my memories of years ago, and I'm like, wow, that was a cool thing, and I remember it, and I don't know, I like it. I'm not scared of social media or those things. They already know everything about me that could ever be wanted to know. And so at any rate, I'm glad you're here. It's always fun to connect with you, Val.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Yeah.
And Val, the thing that you said about keeping a file of these things in marketing, when we see good stuff, good copy, good imagery, we call that a swipe file. And for what you're doing is you're swiping humor. And Jason just has a collection of his old stuff from Facebook Time Hop. That's his swipe post, because what he'll do is he'll go back and find something he posted 10 years ago, and it's still as valid today as it was 10 years ago. And he just like dusts it off and reposts it.
It's true. And I think, on that, so that James is letting you all know the behind the scenes genius of what and how creative I am. No, it's like I've got almost 50, I've got 16. I don't know how long I've been on Meta. I've been around. I was an early adopter when you had to be invited to it, right? So when it's Facebook, and I've got like memories from way back when. But I think what James just said, and I promise listeners, our GBF Nation, we are going to get to Val and genetics. But what's interesting is with James too, when I go back to our social media feeds, we are saying, James, the same message for the last decade, 2 decades. Like it's the same consistency. So if you guys want to fact check James and I and our truthiness and our commitment to what we're doing, go to our social media feeds, go back in our time. You're going to see it consistently the same thing, even before podcasts were a thing. We've been doing this. So at any rate, thank you for that reminiscent and also exposing my genius of just repurposing. I appreciate that. I think that's working smarter and not harder myself. But at any rate, I'm glad that Val's here. I can't wait to dive in.
Yes, and I think a lot of this stuff is we're very lighthearted with a lot of banter back and forth, but there's a compound of knowledge that we're going to share today, and there's a lot of actionable work that Val's been doing for 25 years. And you've witnessed the entire evolution of personalized medicine. And I think that that's really interesting. But when did you realize that genes held the key to getting people better faster? And when was your first aha moment that changed everything for you?
That's a really good question. So there were probably two aha moments. The first one, I remember it was Halloween of 1998. Or was it 99? I think it was 98. I was at a presentation. I was finishing up my bachelor's at the University of Illinois, and it was Halloween. And for some reason, I just wanted to wear a Batman outfit. So that day, I was walking around school in a Batman outfit, and there was this presentation by some doctor, PhD guy in our building at the university animal sciences lab. They have like this, big auditorium, and they were talking about, it was some presentation on, I don't know if it was macronutrients or something having to do with human health. And I raised my hand in the back, and I said it like kind of like a raspy voice, like, Batman has a question, which is typical for, especially on Halloween. So I asked if it was like protein requirements for people. And I asked if it was like able to be personalized with by knowing different genetic factors, having read some books recently on, the new topic of genomics. This is the late 90s, so it's quite a while ago. And the second, even bigger aha moment was maybe like 2 or 3 months later. I was at another live presentation at the university. It was a smaller room. It was like in a classroom. And there was this PhD guy giving a presentation on 2 groups. And one group had a specific variant. And they were able to lose weight with like heavy exercise. And then there was the other group, and they couldn't lose a lot of weight. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I need to know what this mutation is, where half the people are able to lose more weight versus the other ones with heavy exercise. So that was probably the aha moment, like in the twilight of the field of genomics.
I love that. First of all, thanks for sharing that. I love the Batman has a question. I love that visual that you gave me, and young Val saying that. I really love that. And I also appreciate, I was just reminiscing about some of the professors that I've had. And I keep in touch with them, because they were very formative, of course, in my education and my understanding, and challenged me in all the ways we need to be challenged. It's interesting. I want to dive into what you said, about personalized, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but health through addressing it from personalized genomics, especially with the idea of weight loss. Because we have a lot of people, I have a lot of folks, historically, I've worked with countless people over the last 25 years. And I would say there's basically 3 main things that people struggle with, symptomatically: energy, weight loss, and mood. There's a lot of other things people have, but those are the 3 big ones. And then a lot of other things could contribute to that. One of the questions I get all the time is, hey, if I show you my sequence, my genome, can you tell me how to lose weight? And I have my own thoughts on this, but you're the expert, and I want to hear about this variant. And I'd love for you to talk about what we're looking for there. Yeah, what's the variant, and what can we do? Boy, I'm trying not to. Here's the thing. I'm just going to say it. I'm hedging my words, Val, because I'm trying not to lead you, but I'm just going to go ahead and say what I'm trying not to say. I want to use the word epigenomics, right? I want to talk about, and for people that are listening, when we talk about genomics or genetics, of course, we know it's the human code. That's what we're talking about, right? But when we talk about epigenomics or genetics, epi is a prefix that means on top of. So we're talking about something, epigenomics, epigenetics, something that's on top of the genes, that's actually regulating the genes. And what I always say, because I'm not a geneticist, and Val, please tell me if I'm saying this wrong, when we're working in the field of epigenetics and we're trying to influence genetic expression, I like to say we're not necessarily what our genes say. That's just potential. Epigenetics can turn on the good genes and turn off the bad genes, and we can swipe them back and forth. If we're making bad choices, bad genes get turned on. If we're making good choices, good genes get turned on. That's my understanding of epigenetics. Please correct me or fill it in, and then tell me how this applies to weight loss.
Oh, sure. So yeah, for weight loss, it's obviously extremely important, especially in this day and age. Western diet, reduced exercise, all sorts of chemicals, making everyone bigger. So genetics and epigenetics are really connected. Genetics is your germline DNA code. So for everybody listening, everyone has about 3 billion letters in their code. And you don't get 26 letters in the alphabet for DNA. You only get 4, A, G, C, and T. And out of these 3 billion base pairs, there are about 2,000 important common SNPs that kind of, and by SNPs, I mean like instead of a G, you have the letter A, or instead of a C, you might have the letter A or the letter T.
I'm going to intervene here too, just for language. SNPs, SNPs is what Val's referring to, and big word here. They stand for single nucleotide polymorphisms. What that means is that I rather than that word, I just use the word glitch. It's like a glitch in the code. I don't know how else to say it. It's a glitch in the expected code. Is that a good way to think about it? Those SNPs?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a glitch. And glitches are usually bad in some ways, but good in other ways.
Yeah.
So you might have a SNP that, instead of G, maybe 10% of people have A as the letter in this part of the gene sequence. So the gene that makes the protein look a little bit different. And so maybe 10% of people have increased risk of breast cancer from this one mutation. But they have a reduced risk of autoimmune disease like lupus or Hashimoto's. So there's not that many SNPs or variants or mutations that are just plain bad. Because if they're just plain bad, eventually it just eventually leaves the human genome after a few generations. If you have a mutation where you have like an extra head growing out of the side of your body, you're probably not going to get a lot of second dates, right?
Right.
So just like things that are really bad for people, like increased risk of childhood cancer. If there's some gene that really, really increases that, well, then the person will never grow up to be an adult and pass off their genes. So humanity has a efficient way of, if something's really bad, there's going to be less of it. On the other hand, if something's really good, maybe there'll be more of it. So, like, let's take ApoE, the gene issue with Alzheimer's, right? That's a pretty big topic of discussion. So, in the past, it's likely that the ApoE4, the gene, the high Alzheimer's gene, was increased in humanity, and recently there have been more ApoE3 and ApoE2s. So you can have one copy of the 2 and then one copy of the 3, or you can have both copies of the 3. Either way, you have 2 copies of most of these genes because you have 2 parents. So you got one from mom, one from dad. So with the E4, if you have one copy of E4 and then one side of your family has some kind of history of Alzheimer's, it's most likely that that's the side that you got the E4 copy from. And that increases risk of Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease. However, it decreases the risk of just about everything else. It decreases the risk of type 1 diabetes, decreases the risk of other autoimmune diseases, decreased risk of fatty liver, decreased risk of type 2 diabetes, decreased risk of chronic kidney disease, kidney failure, all sorts of other health issues. It decreases them, increases VO2 max, increases aerobic performance. So,
and Val, that's all. I just want to be clear. That's all ApoE4.
Yeah, we're talking about people who have a copy of ApoE4. Now, if you have 2 copies of ApoE4, it's like 2% of people have that, Caucasians. People with African genetics, more like 3 or 4% have that, a little bit increased. So E4, double E4, that has a very high chance of Alzheimer's. So the average person has about a 4% risk of dying of Alzheimer's. Then if you have a copy of E4, it's double. So it's like 8%.
Wow.
Women have it maybe a little bit worse. Maybe it's triple for them. And then if you have both copies, it multiplies by 10 to 15 times.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
it's like a 40% chance of dying of Alzheimer's. And then if you die, but it's not of Alzheimer's, you still may have some. But there are lots of people walking around with one or both copies without
Yeah.
any Alzheimer's whatsoever.
That's interesting.
They might be old, they might be 95, 98 years old, 100 years old. They might not be able to think as fast, but if you tell them, what's your name? I'm Joe Smith. And you ask them like, what's a recent war? Oh, I saw something about Ukraine. Like they just know. So they're obviously lucid. They have full faculties. They're just a little slow because they're 95 years old, but they don't have Alzheimer's. So the question is, how do you get from where we are, which is we're all 30, 40, 50 years old? How do we get to, let's say, 100? Don't want to be rude. Oh, I want to get to 130. Let's just say 100. How do we get to 100 reasonably healthy with reasonable quality of life? Maybe we don't have to go to the doctor in and out of hospitals for the last 10, 20, 30 years of our life. Hey, that'd be nice, right? It'd be nice to have some kind of a reasonable golden years, because right now there is no golden years. Everyone's sick, right? There are, maybe 1 out of 10 older people are like, not too many problems. That is not cool. It used to be when we were, maybe 100 years ago, everybody was healthy when they were in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we had some issues with, we didn't have, antibiotics, and, someone got sick. That's why the life expectancy wasn't as good. We didn't have cool surgeries and things that can save us. So people died in their, 40s, 50s, 60s. But before they died, they were really healthy. They were doing just fine. So how do we get there? That's the question.
I think it's a great question. And I don't know why this sparked in me, but I feel, and what I've seen, and I've been in practice for 25, 30 years, I've been around patients and clients for a very long time. And I have noticed in my personal practice that honestly, it seems like it's getting worse. I don't know how to say that, but the expression, let me say what's getting worse. The expression of symptoms, the expression of disease states seems to be getting worse. In fact, back in 2010, based on some CDC data that came in, I wrote an article. I don't remember for what magazine, but it might have been Blue Planet Green Living or something like that. It was kind of an national magazine, but not like Time. And I think it was Blue Planet Green Living. And the title of the article was based on the CDC data that came out for the year. I titled it, "Americans Are Now Fatter and Dying Younger." And what I was looking at was childhood deaths related to cardiovascular diseases and obesity in children. And the data was staggering in 2010. And I've returned to that data a few times, and it's only getting worse. I mean, we see chronic diseases now, not just cardiovascular deaths and heart attack deaths. And I'm not even trying to go down the whole vaccine, controversy. I'm talking pre-pandemic, we were seeing these things. And I can't help but think it's because we're in our epigenetic state and with our environmental fill in the blank, toxins, ultra processed foods, sedentary lifestyle. I mean, all this stuff is just turn on those bad genes. I keep calling them bad genes, but the expression of those genes that leads to those things. Val, am I hitting the point? And James, I see you have your hand up. Val, did I hit that point? Or I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then we'll jump over to James.
Sure. James, go. What were you going to say?
Okay.
Well, as I'm listening to you guys, that's the beautiful part about my position on the show is I'm, the non-doctor, non-scientist. I'm the journalist, marketer guy. So I listen to it and I see it from a different lens. And I kind of want to basic it down for people, because once you ratchet it up too high, a lot of people can't follow the conversation, because there is a lot of high level conversation going on about genetics. Well, I'll just tell everybody, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Val. Your genetic code is a double helix. It's that thing that people see on the image where there's two things that are kind of spindled together. It looks like a ladder that's
That's exactly
twisting.
right.
Yep.
So,
And
there's good genes and bad genes. So the double helix DNA has good and bad genes, but like I said before, it's not just good or bad. It's good in some ways, bad in other ways. Like, for example, the BRCA gene, right? The rare BRCA gene increases risk of breast cancer, but it also increases fertility. It also reduces inflammation to an extent. So there are certain things that just people don't realize. If they look at the totality of their genome, most people are pretty well balanced.
so
So
so the archetype in character, not just genes, is there's a victim, a villain, or a hero. So really what we need to do is figure out where the villains are and the victims are and create hero genes.
That's right.
We need to create like superhero genes to where people aren't bogged down with whatever was inside of them that they were born into and what was layered on top of that. It was the epi. So we need to find out where the biome is for a person, like what's going on inside of their body, their mental state, their physical state, their emotional state, and figure out how to crack that code. And I think that's where I was hoping to take this to, was this, I call it the triad. You call it the AWAM, but I call it the triad. It's the weight, the addiction, and the mental.
Yeah.
And that's a really fundamental thing that I think people can learn a baseline level of how we get to the APO or whatever you're talking about, and how they get to the predispositions for the brachy or brechy or whatever it is for the breast cancer. There's different parts of like the building blocks that are pretty fundamental, that if we can get those things under control, people can have a better quality of life and have the hero gene rather than the victim or villain gene.
Sure. And there are ways to do that. The best ways to do that is to look at your genes and tie in genetic variants and predispositions to symptoms. Tie in genetic variants and predispositions to blood labs like high cholesterol, high blood sugar, any other metabolomics test out of whack, et cetera, et cetera. So if I run one test on someone, I'm going to get a lot of information, right? We run a metabolomics test, we run a gastrointestinal test, a stool test. We get information. That information is useful, but it becomes even more useful in context of other tests and in context of patient symptoms, history, and family history.
I was going to throw in too, again, I'm not a geneticist. I do look at genomes, and I rely on experts like you to help me understand those genomes from a clinical perspective. And so I appreciate that. But there's a couple of things that came to mind, because I just want to be really clear about something, and maybe I'm wrong. My understanding is, and I'm not trying to pick on any companies, but people think, hey, I did 23andMe or I did Ancestry and they did my code and they told me about this. And my understanding is they're not really analyzing the whole code. It's like a real surface level of the code.
Yeah, that's
And
a very good point.
and when you dive in, when you say analyzing the human genome, we're sequencing the whole genome and looking for, like you said, those SNPs that might predispose someone to certain conditions or symptoms. And then you're overlaying that not only with symptoms, but what it could mean with labs, and then what it means for longevity. Am I correct in your analysis? I just want to differentiate, because people think, hey, I did the 23andMe and they told me that, I have a predisposition to gain weight. I'm teasing, but your analysis, help me through the difference between that level of an analysis and what you're talking about.
Sure. So first of all, 23andMe doesn't do much heavy analysis. Companies like 23andMe, Ancestry, MyHeritage, et cetera, they just do more genealogical stuff. And they have like they have like a light version of their health report, which is, even by 2016 standards, it's just not,
Yeah.
it's not a lot of information. But back in the old days, back in the heydays, we used to do those tests on people because we didn't have other options for DNA testing. So like back in 2018, I'd have someone run a 23andMe test on themselves. And then I also have them run an ancestry.com test on themselves. I would get both data sets, combine them using a nice little piece of proprietary software written by Dr. Peter Diadamo.
Oh, sure.
And I would upload it and analyze their data because that's the only way that I could get the good data. Then Diagnostic Solutions Lab finally created a test where it actually looked at a lot of the SNPs we wanted. And actually myself and a few other practitioners were asked, hey, what SNPs do we include in this thing? So we added a few hundred SNPs to like one of the standard panels that we're using. And that was kind of like the beginning of my like expansion into like massive data and genomics, was back in 2018. And as for, to answer your question regarding whole genome sequencing versus normal, there are different levels of analysis. The first one is a short panel. What's a short panel? You can get short panels from a lot of different companies, MaxGen, Fagron, all these different companies. They have short panels of 50 to 300 SNPs. And they look at just those, and they either can use just regular sequencing, like similar to 23andMe, or use a much more advanced, much higher accuracy per SNP.
Mm-hmm.
So they can do either way. It's obviously a little bit more expensive to do it per, make sure every SNP is correct. And those are short panels. And then the long panels are ones you get like from 23andMe or Ancestry or a lot of these other companies that come out. And those usually test, I would say, 600 to 800,000 SNPs. And that's your standard DNA testing. And from these, some companies impute a lot more SNPs or guess. So you have 600,000 SNPs, but using those 600,000, you can guess using imputation software about 200 million.
Oh, wow.
Which is almost 10% of your genome, right? Because 3 billion's the total number of sort of SNPs that you have, right? So almost 10% can be guessed. And then, of course, the highest level is to sequence everything.
Mm-hmm.
You have 30x, which means an average of 30 times is when every single letter is calculated, is tested. And whole genome sequencing is a little bit more. It's like $500-600 more than standard DNA testing, which is usually like 1 to 400, depending on the different types of tests. So whole genome is kind of the direction it's going. Regular testing, it's great for common SNPs and semi-rare SNPs. And especially if you do that plus imputation, it's pretty accurate. But once you get past SNPs that are like 1 in 1,000 people, 1 in 2,000, it just becomes degraded, like the odds of catching those. And when you get to BRCA SNPs, which are like 1 in 10,000, right? You can't catch those with standard DNA testing and imputation. You're going to need whole genome. So that's probably the future. That's probably the direction it's going.
Well, I feel like we're painting with really broad strokes at the moment. And I feel like there's a lot of good information you're sharing there, Val. But you're talking about a 7-year arc from when you were having these two ancestral.com tests and the 23andMe test to where we are today. So that's a huge curve. And 7 years in that translation of language, now you're getting a whole lot more clarity, I think, and a whole lot more. You're not just a Viking from a ancestral.com, and you're not just going to sell your data like 23andMe. So there's a dark side to this too. There's a side where people are getting tied up and they've basically, written off, given away their code, if you will, their code to companies that weren't so amazing and protecting them and doing the right thing. And now they're bankrupt and doing things that are really, I think, kind of in the hand of big pharma. So I don't want to go down that path. I'm just talking about the 7-year curve of where we are today, of where you said that you started doing these types of like assessments with people. But real actionable stuff like, addiction and genetic tests for behavior, like things that people are going to look at and say, I need this. My kids need this. My wife is sick. I was at the airport yesterday, and this guy sat next to me with his wife, and they asked me what I did. And I said, I'm a professional podcaster. And they're like fascinated. And I told them the projects that I do and how our first show, Cairo Hustle, just turned 8, and how this new show that we're going to have you on today is 8 episodes in. You're episode 9. And how excited I was for it because of the footprint that we're creating and this ecosystem that we're creating. We're creating a sequencing. We're creating a sequencing of geniuses that are going to be able to unlock people's needs for what their families are struggling with. And she says, what do I do for somebody that has cancer? I said, geez, I'm not an expert, but I guarantee you we're going to have somebody on that's going to be able to share with us some stuff. So you're talking about the breast cancer gene. Talk to us a little bit about like how what you're doing can help somebody with testing and then taking action, because I think that that's the missing link is we can test all day. But if we don't get it somewhere with the testing, what are we doing? We can have the smartest guy in the room, but if they don't know how to communicate, they're just really smart. So that's not going to get them anywhere, and they'll have all the knowledge inside of them, but there's no action because that person doesn't have actionable information. So just say like somebody's like, hey, my diagnosis yesterday, cancer. What do we do? How do you do gene work
really
for that?
Question.
That's a good one.
So there are different stages to to dealing with cancer. So first of all, I don't like people focusing on the cancer and the word cancer because that kind of gives it power, right?
It does.
So you can say,
that's what we know it as.
That's what we know it as. Yeah. So yes, someone can have cancer. It's diagnosed as cancer, but there's also the placebo effect, right? And there's also, you can empower yourself to beat things where you beat the odds. Oh, there's a 3% chance of survival. But if you really believe that you can survive something, maybe instead of 3, it's really 30 or 50. You don't know. So the stages of cancer are, one is cancer prevention. So you haven't been diagnosed. There's no lump. There's no abnormal blood markers. There's like all these different lab tests. I'm sure, Jason, there's like CA19-9 and all these different lab markers, right?
I order them all the time. People ask me for blood markers all the time. They're like, what's my cancer risk? Is there a blood test we can do? And I'm like, I can run markers and see if you have any floating around in your system. That's what blood can tell us. That's where we are.
That's like a really nice, preemptive. So, so cancer prevention is you don't have cancers, there's no markers, but you don't want to get it. And there's 2 reasons you don't want to get it. Actually 3. One is family history. Everybody in your family, nobody died of a heart attack. They all died of some kind of cancer, usually breast, colon, prostate. And then the other is you have risks, like you were an alcoholic for 20 years, or you were a chain smoker smoking 2 packs a day for a decade, or you worked in a factory and you were exposed to all sorts of crazy stuff, and 5 of your buddies at the factory have cancer, or you're a female, like this is actual true story, who grew up in a certain part of a certain town, and everybody they know by the time they're 40 or 50 has cancer. So it must be some kind of an environmental, is it drinking water? Is it some spraying? Who the heck knows, right? But you can't just deny that, like everybody's getting cancer. There's something going on. It doesn't take an epidemiologist to come in and give this final verdict, right? Like you walk around Mississippi and everyone's obese. You don't need data to prove that. You're like, hey, what's going on here? Let's try to figure out the problem, right? So we can all be healthier. So preventing breast cancer is one thing. Then if someone gets diagnosed, what do you do? What do you do in the middle of chemo or radiation? There are certain things you could do right in the middle of it that can improve your chances. Like, for example, you can have a diet that kills cancer cells. And this stems in part from a theory of the lectin theory of cancer, which is that certain food lectins can actually kill cancer cells. And I wrote an article about this back in 2005, and it's actually the most referenced lectin review article in PubMed history. You guys can look it up.
Nice. Okay.
Look up my last name in 2005. You'll see it. So basically, I went through all the different cancers. I went through all the different food lectins and everything in the literature, including several articles by a guy named Pustai, very famous lectinologist, so to speak. And it turns out that certain food lectins can cause inflammation. Certain food lectins can kill cancer cells. And specifically, they are used in laboratories. People do in vitro testing, and they use these food lectins to detect cancer, and they know that it's cytotoxic to the cancer, but the connection is still yet to be made, even though those of us in the know there's a connection, but maybe there's just not enough research funding because of the stranglehold that pharma has on natural medicine, which is hopefully breaking down now a little bit. So food lectins are used in vitro in cancer research, and we eat these foods that contain the lectins. So if you eat certain foods, they will get into your body. These lectins are proteins, and not all of them are going to get digested in your stomach by your stomach acid and enzymes. A part of it will pass the stomach, enter the mesenteric circulation or lymphatic circulation, and get to different parts, different targets in your body.
Wow.
So you can actually, to an extent, kill some extra cancer cells, and you kind of want that, right? So imagine it's World War II, and you're fighting the Nazis, and you're in France, and you're the Allies, and you're trying to go into Germany, right? Wouldn't it be cool, in addition to having like the battle line that you slowly move forward, wouldn't it be nice to have some spies, right, that go in and kind of disturb Germany so you could defeat them easier before they kill off more people? So that's exactly what we're doing. It's like a multimodal method of dealing with different types of cancers.
Wow.
And for breast cancer, for example, there's lots of things you could do. There's all these different pathways. And the lectin pathway, where you could determine with some genetics which ones are the best. And part of the reason lectins, they not only kill cancer cells, but there's actually a receptor on all your cells called TF antigen, Thomson-Frieden-Reich antigen. And this receptor is not visible normally. If you can imagine, you have a cell, right? And on the outer coating of all your bodily cells, there's all this fuzz. There's all these different receptors, and all our cells are very fuzzy. And there's a receptor called TF antigen, named after famous people, Thomson and Frieden-Reich. So I guess they share the invention of discovering it. And this thing is encrypted, but the more cancerous a cell becomes, the more it's visible. This is like one of the benefits of our immune system. Our immune system and our bodily system, our DNA, is so awesome that if a cell gets cancerous, the cell will cry for help. And it'll say, it'll change the display. So immune cells go by, and they go by a healthy cell. Oh, that's a nice cell. Good job, cell. And then they'll go by a cell, and then it'll have like a slightly different display. And this TF antigen becomes visible, and it's not encrypted. It's open, and it attaches to it, and it says, oh my gosh, something's wrong with this cell. You know what? Just to be sure, let's just kill the cell and make it go into apoptosis.
Cell death. That's what that means.
Yep. Nice, quiet cell death. It's not necrotic. Things aren't spilling out everywhere. It's a beautiful cell death. And
That's so interesting, Val. I honestly, I have so many questions for you. I've been trying to keep notes. In fact, our wonderful and brilliant executive producer, Rachel, said, and I'm quoting her behind the scenes, she said, I can hear you typing a little. Not too bad, but just letting you know your microphone's really good. So I apologize, everybody. But Val, I was keeping so many notes because you were just spilling truth there. I want to just come in and I have at least a couple of questions, but maybe we can blend them together. But the first thing I wanted to say is for everybody, I want to differentiate between predisposition and predeterminism. I think this is an important thing for us to just talk about. Predisposition means that in genetics, you have the genetic chance of developing X, Y, or Z, fill in the blank, obesity, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, whatever it is, you have a predisposition. In the old days, when we first understood human code or genetics, we would say that it was predetermined. My mom died of sudden cardiac death. So did my grandma and my grandpa, and I'm going to die of sudden cardiac death too, because that's what we got. It sucks to be me with my genes. So I just want to be really clear with everybody listening that your genes are not a life sentence, so to speak. It's just like Val was saying, even the bad genes like the APO4 can be protective on other things. So we can't just say there's good and bad. Like I used to say that I'm going to change my language. So I just want to talk about, I want to just make sure everybody understands that genes are not predetermining. They're just predisposing you. Totally different.
It's back to my archetypes, Jason. It's the victim, the villain, or the hero.
Yeah, it is. And it's all right. I mean, there's a song that I love that says, he's singing to his woman. And he says, you can be my greatest hero and you're also my greatest villain, and I feel like I might have screwed up the words and I don't know who that was. Need to breathe, maybe. I don't know. But nonetheless, and I'm sorry for screwing up the lyrics. But I think it's true with our genes that we have this. I have two questions. One is about lectins and one is about telomerase. And I'm going to cover the lectin one first. Okay. I have never heard this before. I'm going to repeat what you said. We take lectins so that everybody knows what we're talking about. Lectins are, they're really plant poisons. I'm just going to say that. Every plant has lectins in it. The reason, the most famous lectin that we have is gluten, right? We talk about gluten all the time. It's bad, bad, bad. But not all lectins are bad. In fact, humans in our, listen, however you want to say it, in our evolution, in the way we were created, or the way that our evolution was created. You can choose which path you want to go down there. I'm a created and evolution guy. That all said, we have coexisted and symbiotically developed and adapted so that most plant lectins are not toxic to us. There are some that are really bad, but most of them aren't. We can coexist with these, quote, plant poisons. The reason that they create these plant poisons, everyone, is that they don't want to be eaten. Let's just be really honest. Like plants want to exist. They want to propagate just like the rest of us. They don't want to die and get eaten. So they create plant poisons. And that cause problems in some animals and not in others, right? So at any rate, it's
most common, like a poison ivy.
Yeah, poison ivy would be one. It's an oil, but same idea. Plants create these things to protect themselves, so animals don't want to eat it. Okay. Lectins in cancer research, and I also want to say that Stephen Gundry wrote a book. I was going to say the definitive book on this. I don't know if it is, but he wrote a book called The Plant Paradox, which basically says, hey, you've got chronic health issues. You might not want to eat plants in the way that you're eating them. We might want to rethink this. That's kind of leading up to my question. I've never heard lectins used in cancer research. I'm writing a book right now called Carnivore Consciousness. And guess what? It's an animal-based diet. And I don't want to get into that today, but there's things with my animal-based diet that I'm putting together that are problematic. Vitamin C comes to mind. There's not a lot of vitamin C that we're going to get from animal products. So a lot of people that are doing hardcore carnivore, everybody, as far as I'm concerned, needs to do some vitamin C. I like liposomal vitamin C. So I understand that. And I'm adding those things in. But lectins, I'm not really getting lectins in my diet whatsoever by avoiding plant products and eating carnivore. Before I ask my absolute question, I do want to say I wrote another book in 2023 that was a bestseller called The Epic 5 Plan. And in that, it's about 5 pillars: hydration, diet, movement, stress management, and sleep hygiene. But the diet dives deep into a plant-based diet, higher in fiber, low glycemic index, still leaning on animal proteins and fats.
What were the 5 pillars again? Hydration,
diet, movement, nervous system regulation, and sleep hygiene. I actually have, after I finish Carnivore Consciousness, I'm going to write a follow-up to that book. That's going to be called I don't know if it's the next pillar, the sixth pillar, the next pillars, but community needs to be put in there as well. I left that out, and I think there's some development that could come from 2023. All of that said, I'm on both sides of the fence here. I've got a strategic diet that I've used for 25 years to help people get into autoimmune remission. I mean, it's all plant-based, and it's interesting that I've used with my cancer clients, my people that the Hail Mary passes that they've been given 3 weeks to live. And what can we do? I mean, I'm putting them on low glycemic, plant-based, protein-based, fat-based, getting them, trying to starve their cells, but get them nutrients. I now see partially what I was doing was giving them some lectins, probably some healthy lectins that we've co-adapted to. Finally, my question: I'm eating carnivore. Rachel and I are hardcore carnivore right now for research purposes, but also, interestingly, health purposes. I've lost, I don't even know how many, 25 pounds in the last few months. I'm doing this. My blood pressure is normalized. I'm off my blood pressure meds. I have more energy. My inflammation is down. I mean, all this great stuff that I can track with labs, right? My question is, with carnivore, I don't know how to ask this. There's not lectins in carnivore, but are there chemicals like lectins from animal-based sources, foods, that also are destructive to the cancer cells? That also, and I assume the way the lectins work is that there's a chemotaxis being put out from the cancer cells, like a little signal, a chemical signal that's like, hey, I'm bad, something bad, this is aberrant, something's not working. And then the immune system is like, oh, we need to taxi over the chemotherapy, right? I'm teasing, but the chemotaxis, like we got to transfer that over to that cell so the macrophages or whatever can eat that cell. And coming back to the cell death that you were talking about, the apoptosis. What do I need to do with carnivore? Like what am I missing? Like, this seems like a whole area that I'm missing.
So let's analyze the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Let's analyze inter-individual variation, like who should be eating more lectins, fewer lectins, et cetera, because I think that really, because there's no one size fits all. It's like an N of 1, right? A lot of people are saying the N is not 300,000, it's 1. So some people do really well with carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
The people that will do the best on the carnivore diet is people who have high oxalate sensitivity, because oxalates, right? And that's easy to test with genomics.
Mm-hmm.
People who do really, really well with vitamin A, because some people have SNPs in their BCO1 gene. There are 2 common ones. There's a few rare ones, but there are 2 common ones where if you have one or both copies of those, you're just not converting. You have beta carotene, great, you ate 2 carrots, but the guy next to you, he could convert it at 2 or 3 times the rate that you can to convert beta carotene to like active vitamin A. So vitamin A, it's almost as important as vitamin D, and we all know vitamin D is number 1 in everything, right? But they forget about vitamin A. Everyone likes Batman, but they forget about Robin. And so that's what vitamin A is. It's not spoken about. You look at studies, they did these studies in Africa, parts of Africa where people are getting more vitamin A. Measles, no problem. Other diseases, no problem. HIV, not as bad. Parts of the—
Wait, did you just say that we can help prevent certain epidemiological diseases by just taking things like vitamin A and vitamin D? Wow, it's almost like during the post-pandemic era, we learned that about vitamin D. And for some reason, other than people like me being crazy online in 2020, nobody was talking about that stuff.
You know what? Just admit it. You're a conspiracy theorist, and no.
It's
So,
you know what?
absolutely. The
The
COVID,
older I
whole
get,
COVID
the
thing.
older I get, the more I realize there's a reason there's conspiracy theories. You know what I mean?
No,
I'm
no,
just gonna say that.
It's conspiracy strategist.
Oh, thank you.
There you
That's what it
go.
is.
We're
I
not
No,
theorizing.
seriously,
We're not theorizing anything anymore. We're strategically making markers
I mean,
like
it
those
used
blood
to be
tests. We have markers now that we can follow to know.
right. Exactly. Like if people actually analyzed all the common conspiracy theories, at least half of them are actually true. Like Gulf of Tonkin, that's no longer a conspiracy theory. They
Right.
conspired.
Dude,
You look at like Roosevelt or whoever who was in charge when right before Pearl Harbor. Like we knew Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked.
FDR, yeah, I
We
think.
leave our nice new ships there. We left a bunch of old ships, and we decided to let several thousand of our soldiers die, which is horrible. I wouldn't have done that. I don't think I would have done that.
Yeah.
But we did. It was on purpose.
Yeah.
With weapons of mass destruction. There were no WMDs in Iraq. Was that a conspiracy theory? No. It turned out to be true.
Right.
So many things are like false, and then later you turn out to be true. It's like, wait a minute. Now all these other theories are getting retroactive heat because they're under heat because now maybe they were correct. Like for example, COVID, maybe it was released in a lab. Now we're finding out it's probably released
in a lab
on purpose, on accident. Let's not even discuss that for a second. But let's look at the retroactive heat of all these other viruses, all the different herpes virus, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus. Which of these we're doing research? All of them. In labs, all of them. Were any of them released?
All of them.
All of them. Well, it's interesting because James and I were talking the other day about this. We had the pleasure of hosting him for a few days here away from Colorado. He got to vacation in the sauna that we like to call Iowa summer. And we were talking about this, and he showed me a comedian's clip. And I won't repeat everything the comedian says because it's comedy and it's got a lot of foul language and funny ideas. But anyway, the gist was this. He was like, conspiracy theories and all this. He's like, y'all think your government doesn't lie to you? You really think they're batting 1,000 and telling you a truth all the time? And this was his gist. He's like, I've got one kid. And he's like, I lie to that kid all the time. And he's like, our government has 350 million people. He goes, you don't think they lie to you? And it's like, never, and when he said that, I'm like, well, that makes sense. I think every parent can understand that, and since we've created the nanny state with parents, maybe not anymore, but, we created a nanny state there for a while. Maybe we're pulling out of it. I mean, mom and dad are going to lie to us. I mean, it's going to happen. Maybe it's for our quote own good in their opinion. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's for their own gain and their own ease. But anyway, I'm going to share that joke. James, go ahead.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm listening to what both you guys are saying. And I want to get back to this. I made some notes earlier today that Corona just ain't a beer. And I want to talk about the Corona. You're talking about herpes and Epstein-Barr, and we're talking about these labs, these things that are like petri dish that get exposed to our culture now. That's basically, it's rampant in everybody. But you're talking about feeding it lectins. Or not feed it, but you're also talking about carnivore consciousness, eating a certain type of, like, moderating your consumables. But what if we didn't eat for a while? What if we stopped eating for a while and stopped feeding these things and got adjusted by a chiropractor and compounded? Like earlier, I was like, we're going to compound some things here, like the opener. Like, we're compounding some things. So we're taking the double helix, which is the DNA, and we're looking at that compounded with epigenetics compounded. Now we have virus compounded. Now we're talking about eating things that turn things off or turn things on, compounded. Now we're talking about a pathway, narrow gauge pathway to only eat a certain way. What else do we need to do to compound that? Now we're saying, what happens when somebody's genes do turn on to cause these type of symptoms, whether it be Alzheimer's or cancer? Compound. And now we have another thing that we throw in here, like an autoimmune condition. Compound. What if we just quit feeding it? What if we just fasted for 5 days and
Well, that's
compounded
a fantastic thing, and we all agree fasting works. So the
and
question is
compounded
how much, etc.
and compounded all this with chiropractic adjustments?
You're going to
That's
have
where
better
I think
results. Better
that's where
results. You know what? You know
that's
what's
where
going to happen, James? If you do that, you're going to get better faster.
I love it.
that was my whole impetus of bringing all this together, so everybody that's watching this can say, wow, these guys are really high level thinkers. They have a lot going on with this conversation. But if we do these things in actionable advice, this is the outcome that people will get is we all know that we're swimming in this soup of like crud. We all know that we've been released, like the government lying to us on all these different things we just talked about, whether it's war or viral warfare. Now, what do we do to clean up our house and wring out our sponges to make our bodies have good longevity to where we cruise on into our 80s with vitality and a high level frequency of how we communicate and how we behave?
That's beautiful. Well, very well said. Very well said. Yeah, let's briefly talk about lectins, and then let's do a segue into a little bit of breast cancer pathways, so we could see how they're related.
And Val, before you get there, I just want to let people know that are watching, if you have questions, please comment into these. If you have anything that you're curious about asking Dr. JC, myself, or Val, please participate with us, and we will feature your question before the interview is done.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to put a disclaimer out there. Despite the fact that I'm a licensed healthcare practitioner, all information on this podcast is for information purposes only. I can't diagnose or treat anyone from, sitting here in my office, nor would I want to in what we're doing right now. So all this is for informational purposes only, and our information is not meant to treat or diagnose any disease. In fact, if you want to help your disease or diseases get treated or diagnosed, you should see your licensed healthcare practitioner, run some of our ideas by them, but they're the ones in charge. You and them together, we're not in charge of your health.
And the number one doctor in the world is the one inside of you. So
Amen.
Trust your own judgment too.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Take some ownership of these things that are going on in your life, not just depending on third party to say, hey, I'm going to sort you out and put you on this path now. Like, determine what's best for you too. That you have to be an active participant.
I like that. I like that very much. And that speaks to truth. And right now we're a part of humanity where truth is being disclosed left and right. We don't even know. Every day I wake up and there's some new thing that I didn't even realize is going on. And now I have to adjust my paradigm a little bit and adjust this and adjust that. And I think that's a big problem with the stress of today. I think the COVID thing is not totally over, the PTSD of it and all, but it's almost over. People are
shell shock, bro.
Yeah, you still see people walking around with masks, and I feel bad for them. I'm like, some of them actually need a mask. There's some, they have some bacterial issue, but usually it's, as we all know, viruses go through masks like nothing. So I think in the next 2-3 years that'll be all gone. People will revert back. Sometimes it takes people longer. They called it shell shock back at the end of World War II. Now we know it's PTSD. We know how to assess for it genetically. Like, I could tell someone with a simple cheek swab if they're on the 32nd percentile of PTSD genetics and exactly what to do and what genes are turned on too much or turned down too much. But for lectins, getting back on the lectin topic, we're going to figure out how to cure breast cancer right now on this show. We're going to figure out the strategies. So the oncologist is going to recommend chemo and or radiation and or immunotherapy and or surgery to remove the tumor, right?
Cut it out, drug it out, burn it out.
What's that?
Cut it out, drug it out, burn it out.
They have those 4 strategies. So now we're going to superimpose a higher level of analysis. We're going to see where they are on the breast cancer analysis. I have a woman, she's on the 99th percentile of breast cancer risk. She has all the breast cancer genes, not the rare BRCA ones. I'm not talking about those. Those are like 1 in 10,000. There's not a lot of people. I've personally met 3 people ever with actual rare BRCA genes. They're not that common, or maybe 4. I just met a 4th one, actually. She used to work for Designs for Health, but she went somewhere else, but I can't say anymore because of patient confidentiality, even though she'd be totally cool with it. Yeah, there's a lot of common and semi-rare SNPs that are super, super important. And you have a panel, and the panel will give you a risk score of where you are. So what happens then? You have a risk score. Okay, I have high risk of breast cancer. Then we look at all the individual pathways. Sorry, I switched off from lectins. We'll get to lectins in a minute. Let's finish up this breast cancer thing. So we look at the mTOR pathway. mTOR pathway is a really nice, beautiful pathway. It has to do with AKT, ACT 1 and 2, PI3K. These are all genes that are associated with the mTOR pathway. Interestingly, the top number 1 fat gene called FTO, and I'm sure Dr. Bradley, you know the FTO gene. If you're homozygous AA, that's like a high protein, low fat diet to help you lose weight, even though it has nothing to do with like fat cells and has nothing to do with burning fat, none of that stuff. It's all in your mind. It has to do with satiety. You just have lower satiety if you have FTO AA, both copies of A. So the more protein, of course, will increase satiety. So yeah, FTO is definitely connected with this, with the mTOR pathway with cancer. So if you're low with mTOR, you can upregulate or inhibit mTOR at will with different diet nutrition strategies. The other pathway is it's called a MAPK pathway. MAPK pathway has like MAPK1, MAPK3. There's all these different MAP kinase genes, and they're really, really cool. Has to do with cell proliferation. So you definitely want to turn off the MAPK pathway. And also associated with MAPKs are MMPs, which are these weird enzymes that like drill holes to make way for new little capillaries and blood vessels. MMP, metallic proteinases, and also VGF, vascular endothelial growth factors. These are ways for things to get sticky and things to get their own blood supply. By things, I mean like aspiring tumors, right? Tumors to be, so they can, get increased cell division, metastasize, etc. So that's another really important pathway. We know exactly what to do with.
There's just so many pathways, and I think it's fascinating what we can derive. Here's what I always tell my clients, and I'll be like as transparent as I can. I do a very with our private clients, and we keep our virtual consultation business limited on purpose with our clients. We can help them get the attention that they need to solve their issues. All that said, I always say that when we run the blood, and now I'm really emphasizing get genetics done right away as well. But before it was as prevalent and as affordable as it is today, when I started doing my blood and saliva and urine and hair and whatever analysis we're going to do, on every James always says it like, if you give Dr. J your blood, your saliva, your poop, and your spit, he can figure out what's going on and tell you what to do, right? I would add genetics in there as well. I always tell people, so when I run these things, then I run genetics. Here's what's interesting. I usually don't find, in my analysis, much more than what I've already found with that battery of labs that we did. It just substantiates like, oh, that's why you have that issue. Once in a while, I'll pick up on other things, strategies that we can use. Like as an example, if someone has a predisposition to osteopenia, osteoporosis, bone density issues, we can start strategizing around that in their 20s and 30s, so that we're not having that issue in their 60s and 70s,
Exactly.
right? And fracturing hips, right? And what I tell people with genetics, usually though, it doesn't really change what I would tell you to do, but here's what it does tell me. If what I'm telling you to do comes with the F word, and the F word is forever. Because if it's genetically programmed, like, and again, I'll use something that everybody's kind of familiar with, or more people familiar with, that mother effer gene, the MTHFR, right? Or COMT, or something around the methylation pathway. People are a little bit more schooled in this because it's been out in the public a little bit more. We can manipulate that pathway with specific, not regular B vitamins, but with methylated B vitamins. We can manipulate that pathway to help people be healthier. And I tell people, now that we know it's genetic, instead of just checking blood levels of homocysteine or mean corpuscular volumes or other ways to assess the need for B vitamins, I can just go to the genes and say, oh, you've got this. You're going to need to take this methylated B complex forever. And until our understanding of science gets better. I mean, maybe we can eat our foods, but I don't know. I haven't quite yet seen with these, what I call SNPs, what I call the bad SNPs or the hard SNPs to deal with. I haven't seen being able to eat our way around it, although that's a strategy. Sometimes I use supplements to modify or manipulate that genetic pathway. And I think it's fascinating. That's what we're talking about. That said, I wanted to just share something and then ask a question. You mentioned mTOR, and mTOR is a pathway that's very interesting in genetics. And I actually had the fortune, Rachel and I had the fortune of almost working on a project with James William Clement. I'm sure you know him as a geneticist. He wrote the book called The Switch. He's been featured everywhere, Asprey and Mercola and everywhere else. He's just a really nice human being. We were going to do a show together. They got greenlit. We flew to LA, met with the producer, and it was going to be James Clement and I going around the country and interviewing other scientists, kind of like what James Chester and I are doing on this show. So interesting. It's come full circle. That was pre-pandemic. This is post-pandemic.
Great.
I want to recommend, if you guys listeners want to learn more about mTOR, read The Switch by James William Clement. He'll be on our show later this year. We're still coordinating dates. Okay, Val, back to you. I love what we're talking about. I love the testing. You mentioned something to the effect of, hey, if we want to get the cursory kind of test done, 150 to $300, I don't know what the number was. And for a few more $100, we can get like a full genome and an analysis and all of that. I just want to say, as far as, gosh darn it, as far as that goes, what would you say to someone who says, I want all this information, but I can't afford to spend hundreds of dollars on genetic testing. I'm already struggling with the basic healthcare costs that I have. What would you say to those folks in that situation? And then kind of a semicolon, how would you help people in that situation prioritize this investment? I just want to hear your, because this isn't covered by insurance. This is all out of pocket discovery.
This is what I would say.
Yeah.
There are basically 5 levels of affordability for people. Level 1 is you have no money. You can barely make ends meet. The last thing you're going to do is spend another, $1, $2, $3, $500, $1,000, $2,000 on extra testing. You're already getting most of your assistance from a Medicaid or whatever you're doing with that. So there's no way you're going to do any of this stuff. And level 2 is you could afford a little bit, maybe a couple $100, but not really. You're on a real tight budget. And then level 3 is like the average person who can maybe afford a little bit more. If it really came down to it, yeah, you could see yourself blowing $1,000 or $2,000 just to get things done. And then level 4 is you have money, $5,000, no problem. Let's get it done. Level 5 is, multimillionaire.
Right.
People spending, $100,000 a year, like the one guy, right?
Like the 3 of us on this call is what we're talking about, right?
Right. So, I have one of my daughters like, how much do you have in supplements right there on your little supplement counter? And I'm like, I don't even know. Maybe $2,000 of supplements if you got rid of them all. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
certainly, certainly, I'm, you know, I work for Designs for Health. I'm a genomic consultant, and I work on their new product development. And by the way, they're coming out with insanely new next gen gastrointestinal things. I'm not allowed to talk about it. I was
You just did.
specifically told not to talk about it, but I'm still telling you guys
But you just did.
coming out. End
That's
of this
exciting.
year, I don't care if they fire me. End of this year, early next year, there's going to be some bombshell GI stuff coming out. That's all.
That's
awesome.
the way to that's the way to dangle the carrot.
Yeah, and there's also something else bombshell that came out. One of the companies that they actually are associated with, the Diagnostic Solutions Lab, which is the GI map test, right? The GI map test just got a stool omics add-on, stool and then OMX. So that's like a really very different than what everyone else is doing. They look at 9, is it 9 or 10? I don't know. There's like several short chain fatty acids. And this actually can help a practitioner fix IBS, IBD, motility, you know, constipation, diarrhea, microbiome state. Because obviously, if your bile acids are in great shape, that's going to affect not just your colon microbiome, but also the not as much talked about, you know, small intestinal microbiome, because you actually have some small amounts of bacteria in there. So yeah, that stool omics thing, it's like, I think it's like an extra $100 or something on top of the GI map. Just absolutely insane. If you can afford to do that once a year, you know, spend, you know, $400 or $500 on that, it's a life changer. It will change people's lives, especially those with GI problems and gut-brain axis problems. Huge thing.
I'm going to say amen to that. I ran that test many times and I get it. And I think it's cool they're having the omics on. I think that's super cool. And just to kind of double down on what you said, and then we'll go over to James. With our clients, you know, when they come in, like I said, as James says all the time, blood, urine, spit, and poop. We're going to analyze what's going on. I would throw genetics in there as well. I think it's very important to get that stuff done, and we get that done up front with all of our clients, but we also get it done, you know, follow up as needed. But I recommend those tests once a year. Even if you don't, even if you're like, I'm completely okay. I like doing preventive lab testing. I like catching stuff as early as we can, so that we can intervene before it becomes a problem or even presents itself symptomatically. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you guys are putting that together, and I can't wait to see what it is. James, I know that you had I have a statement or question look on your face. I wanted to turn it over to you.
Well, there's like, once again, the compound effect. Like last couple interviews ago, we talked about like healthy hearts. And if you do certain things, it makes it to where you don't get a fire in your heart, kind of. If you like take care of the forest and you do the abatement of the tinder within the forest floor, you don't get heart disease and heart and vascular like inflammation. And I think the same thing about so much to do with what we're talking about here is, if we're detectives and private investigators and we're looking through under the fingernails, if you will, and if we're looking through the trash, if you will, and if we're looking through the behaviors, if you will, like all these if you will statements lead us to where we are, the old way of eating. We're sicker than ever. You know, we have treatment resistant conditions. What's the best pathway to do it? Actionable advice, expert insights. You know, like we are at this position where a lot of the things that people were talking about and following are outdated. You're talking about new releases with this company that you represent, new things, checking out how to make the poop healthier, you know, for lack of a better phraseology. Like if we're making healthier poop, we have a healthier human. And that's just the byproduct of creating a better ecosystem within. And I think that doing the detective work with what you're doing, I was also talking to Jason while I was back in the sauna of Iowa about if people just showed us a sequencing of how things were done, we could buy into it.
Mhm.
Like, how do you make it? What are you trying to have me eat? What are you trying to have me take? What's in it? What's the process? Like,
Yeah.
take me through that journey of life of like why this thing is good for me. And after this, I just want to share with you, I got my numbers back from my taxes last year on 24. I spent $13,474 on health last year. And number one, I'm not sick. I'm not sick. And number two, that's 1,000. I'm just going to give some raw numbers here. That's $1,116.07 a month that I'm spending on my personal health journey as a not sick human, and what that means to stay healthy. So when anybody's like, hey, I can't afford to do this, I'm at my wit's end of finances, I tell everybody, get 3 jobs, go out and work more, make more money, invest in real food, go get these labs done, get these tests done, and create yourself into a person that's harder to freaking kill, and invest in your health like your life depended on it, because it does.
Yeah.
And if you team up with the right people with the right information, you will have the best quality of life every day of your life. And that has to be the game that we're going to go for, and the game that we're wanting to win, because if not, everything else is just Mickey Mouse.
Yes. And yes. And it's important to work with experts, but I want to define what an expert is. Experts are people that never stop learning. And there, Val mentioned that, I can't remember how you said it, but it sparked a memory in my head. Something like, we're working with information that's outdated, right? A lot of times people are old school. Stuff from 2016 isn't valid anymore. But I wanted to actually give some actual data on that. This guy named Denson back in 2011, so a while ago, looked at medical school information from the moment you enter medical school to the moment you get out of medical school. How valid is the information in 2011 with the advancement of our understanding of science? Now, you got to remember, this is pre-AI, right? I mean, so this is 2011. Do you guys want to venture a guess, or just want me to tell you how long it takes for that information to mostly be invalid? Do you guys want to know? You want to guess?
90
James,
days. 90
that?
days. 90 days.
73 days. Every 73 days, the information that we're teaching in medical school is no longer valid. Every 73 days, we understand. That was 2011. Every 73 days, we understand the science better, and it changes everything that we know. And yet, we're still people are still expecting to go to their family practice, general practitioner, primary care specialist person with this advanced understanding. But we all know, in the trenches, peripheral to the trenches, doctors don't keep learning. There's an old joke that they say, if you want to hide something from your doctor, just publish it in their journals, because doctors don't read their own journals. It's a big joke, and it's a sad joke. It's a sad statement. It's not funny, but it's true. We doctors that are in general practice, I'm not one of them. They get, specialists, primary care, acute care, ER, surgeons, specialists, whatever it is, they get the primary their information. They're already outdated by the time they're degreed and through the residency. Like, they're completely out. Like, the information they had to pass their boards is already bullshit. The only info they get past that, for the most part, is continuing ed sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. That's literally, or device companies. Boston Scientific loves those neural implants. They're $30,000. Yeah, let's get a doctor to do one, right? Pay you to do it. The reality is, that's how doctors learn, and it's so outdated. And yet, again, I just want to emphasize this to our listeners. The doctor you're talking to that's in the insurance world, they have no reason to learn more. Even if they learn more, they can't practice it, because it's beyond the standards of care that are locked from about 50 freaking years ago, that we literal and dictated by the pharmaceutical companies. We don't even get to talk about genomics in general medicine. We don't get to talk about epigenetics. We don't get to talk about nutrition, lifestyle, and its effect on overall health, because, as we keep saying, it's cut, poison, burn, cut, poison, burn, cut, poison, burn. That's all we're taught. It doesn't matter really what type of doctor you are. for the most part. There's some caveats to that. Of course, I love chiropractic profession. I love natural medicine practitioners that are really practicing natural medicine, but mostly it's cut, poison, burn. And even those skills are outdated. Like they're already outdated. So I just want people to be careful. And I say this very clearly, and please feel free to disagree with me. Val, you're in the trenches too. I truly believe that people, the American public, the world public, at least the American public, I can speak to that clearly, and the UK public, with NIH, you're never going to find the solutions that you're looking for within the system that has allowed you to stay so sick for so long. I just want everybody to be very clear about that when we're talking about these doctors and these experts, it's not your GP, it's not your primary, it's not your specialist with the ology. I'm a fill in the blank ologist. They don't know. I'm editing myself to not use a bad word. They don't know. Literally, in my opinion, the public is at risk for using those people for anything other than acute care. I don't want to die today. I think that they need to step out of chronic care. That's my soliloquy on my soapbox. Val, I'd love to hear your position on that.
So I think, first of all, I wholeheartedly agree with the direction you were going and the points you were making. Chronic disease is something that we were talking about. You're doing preemptive, you're making preemptive measures so that they don't get sick later. Like if they have osteoporosis, genetics, family history, etc. Well, do something now in your 20s and 30s so that you don't lose bone density, because it's harder to gain bone density back after you've lost it. You still do it to an extent, but it's better if you just didn't have that issue in the first place. And let's say you have some fracture. Now you're sitting around, your leg is up for 2-3 months. You're losing even more bone density. So it's nice to take preemptive steps. I usually do that. I focus on mental health, obesity, as do you. Chronic, like ApoE4. I look at ApoE4, then I also look at overall Alzheimer's risk, right? Because if you look at the ApoE gene, that's half of your risk of your genetic risk of Alzheimer's, and then the other half is all the other little SNPs. So combined, there's like a GAB2 variant. There's all sorts of different ones that modify the risk. So you could like kind of figure out if someone's not too bad, or pretty much like they need to take action. Right?
And to emphasize what we're talking about, just in real practical things here, right? We said through genetic testing, we can identify people that are predisposed to, not predetermined, predisposed to osteoporosis, osteopenia, and I'm going to go one step further, hip fractures. I mean, brittle bones are one thing, but let's talk about hip fractures. This is stuff that I just want everyone to understand. When we're talking about preventive care, when someone fractures their hip due to osteoporosis, osteopenia, thin bones, right, frail bones, over a third of them will be dead, no matter what age, within 1 year. I'll say it again, fracture your bone, a third of people are going to die within 1 year, but wait for it, 10% of them, so 33%, 10% are going to die within 30 days. And when we're talking about osteoporosis, osteopenia, it sounds like, oh, I don't want to break anything. We're talking about death. Like it's a very strong like it's can't say it's a cause, but there's a huge correlation between a hip fracture and dying. So when we're talking about starting in your 25, in your 25s, in your 20s and 30s, and laying down preventative care, this is what genetic testing can do. And it can say, oh, we're going to start now and just protect you from it, whether it's bones or heart or brain or fill in the blank, right? We can start younger and prevent those things later. And I just want everyone to understand when we're talking about it, it's not just, I don't want to break a bone. We're talking about saving lives, adding longevity into the mix, living longer and living healthier. Val said earlier that let's talk about living to 100. Maybe it's 150, but let's just start 100. Val, I want to live to be 150 or 200. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, I've said out loud, I don't know that I want to die until I'm done literally wringing as much out of this world and this life as I can and contributing as much as I can back to my brothers and sisters on this planet. If that's in 50 more years, okay. If that's in 350 more years, okay. If it's 1,000 years, I'm okay with that. But there's strategies, and I think I might have started too late for 1,000 years. But nonetheless, I want to talk about telomeres. And I'm going to bring up a word that is confusing. It's a big word, but basically, we want long telomeres. I'm just going to say that. Al can explain what I mean, but we want long telomeres, and we do not want our telomeres, our genetic code, to be chopped off at the end and butchered down to into a shorter code. The shorter our telomeres, from my understanding, the quicker we die. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but Val, two-pronged question. Number one, can you explain telomeres to us? Number two, if I'm going to live forever, what can I do to slow down my telomere shortening, that telomerase?
Sure. So very important question. So telomeres are a double-edged sword. People with short telomeres, they may have some more health issues, more inflammation, quicker aging, quicker cellular aging. Those with long telomeres, they maybe live a little bit longer, but they also can get more cancer because the cancer cells like kind of replenish their own telomeres so they can keep dividing. So what's a telomere? A telomere is a signal for the body to limit how many times cells divide, to limit growths, to limit cancers, other issues, and also to limit division. So imagine you're the beginning, right? So an egg and a sperm meet, you want maximum division, right? You don't want to curb a division. So you're growing, and then all of a sudden there's a cell that divides from another cell, and then that one's going to be the liver, right? So that one has to turn into trillions of other cells, right? Or billions, however many. And then some other cell evolves, it comes out of another cell, and then that one is going to be your pancreas, right? So then that starts dividing. And then when all this division happens and all your organs are kind of grown, well, you can't have them keep growing or else you're going to die. So that's part of the reason telomeres exist, to sort of like put a halt on growth. So you want to not smoke. That can worsen telomere shortening. Being exposed to secondhand smoke, eating a lot of smoked meats, barbecuing all the time, grilling out, and having the smoke touch you, that increases risk of cancer, but it also shortens your telomeres. Obesity shortens your telomeres. If you want to have, you want to try to be under 25 BMI. If you have a lot of muscle on you, maybe under 30. I know some people with like 0% body fat, like 31, 32 BMI, like real short, stocky wrestlers, right? Sedentary lifestyle will shorten your telomeres. So you need to be active. There is no reason why anyone, unless you have some physical disability, in which case, we work around it, where you should be getting less than 10,000 steps a day. At least 10,000, maybe 15. Low fiber diets reduce telomere. High stress reduces telomere, uses up your telomeres. It's not very good to have that, so you have to manage stress properly. A lot of reasons why, how you can improve things. Avoiding a lot of sugary foods and drinks is a big one. Getting enough DHA. People talk about EPA, but DHA is important too, and that maintains telomeres. Omega-3s, fish oil. Another thing is PCB avoidance. PCBs wreck telomere lengths. So PCBs, what is that? It's polychlorinated biphenyls. And look up how to reduce the levels. It's very easy. You do any internet search, how to reduce PCBs. So you have to do it.
I think that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing all that. And this is what I heard. Basically, to protect our longevity, we have a balance. We have a harmony between shortening and lengthening. We don't want cancer cells to keep proliferating, so we want those things to go through apoptosis or cell death. And there's ways to encourage that. It sounds like what you said, and I don't want to repeat everything because it was a great list. It sounds like if you heard that something's healthy for you, like don't smoke and don't eat ultra processed foods and maybe have a little bit more fiber, exercise, don't be sedentary, drink enough water. It's funny because we have James that's not a doctor, but probably knows more about what we're talking about than most doctors because of his passion for what we're talking about. We've got you and me, trained in what we're trained in and all of our, sciencey stuff. And yet the three of us can sit here and say, man, if people just drank more water, ate real food, moved a little bit more, worked on stress reduction, slept better, had a good community, and kept themselves in a happy mood as best they can. And maybe I'll throw in work with their genetics and tweak the good stuff to be even better, tweak the bad stuff to not really show up. I think that's really what we're talking about. It's funny because it's not, the next new biologic or the next new, GLP-1 drug or anything like that. It's literally basics. And I don't know how much money the three of us has spent on all of our degrees and education and mindset and all that. But I assume, I know myself, I know James, I don't want to speak for Val, but it's in the millions of dollars between our three brains. We've got millions of dollars in brain cells on this call right now. And we're all saying, go back to the basics. It's really interesting, Jim. Go ahead.
Well, to me, it's like the evolution of the Epic 5 plan. Like you're saying, it takes 73 days. Well, you wrote the book how long ago?
A long time ago.
Yeah. Right. So there's an evolution in the carnivore consciousness of where you're going. There's an evolution from the curve of where Val was saying when he was doing 23andMe and Ancestry.com, the 7 years on the curve to where we are today. We're talking about eating like our grandparents, which we're not doing. And how they lived to be 95 while they smoked and chewed tobacco and, didn't put sunblock on, you know, and we're working off this assembly line, like conveyor belt technology that we're still living in this doctor model that you got to trust the person in the white coat. Well, I was just looking up while you guys were talking about, I don't even know if I'm going to say it right, but the word is called, where is it? Iatrogenic death.
Yep.
And that's what came up to me when you were talking about.
Tell us what iatrogenic death means. I just define it. And otherwise we can define it.
Doesn't it mean like you don't know why?
It's just it's death caused by medical care, including errors, complications, or treatment side effects in the U.S.
Iatrogenic death is arguably at least the third leading cause of death in the United States. Death by your doctor, literally death going to your doctor and following their advice. Like literally, I want to say it again. You go to your doctor, you follow their advice, and it's going to kill 250,000 plus people this year in the United States.
And that's the compound effect. Once again, I'm going to get the sledgehammer and compound effect this one.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about SARS-CoV-2 or whatever that Val does the genomics based testing for, the risk score. Like now we're actually finding that there's something, a bioweapon that's been released on humanity. That's my snapshot of what I've seen and how it affected everybody. The people that asked me about cancer yesterday at the airport, they asked me about COVID. Mm-hmm. And they told me about 2020, the guy's work partner just died after taking the shot. The next day, he's like, the next day he just died. Mm. And I was like, by this point, none of us have escaped the matrix of knowing somebody that's passed away from either the shot or the complications with the virus. Oh. And I was like, I absolutely understand how you feel, man. I feel the same way. I've seen it happen time and time again, that bad stuff happens to good people. Yeah. And we believe that we're supposed to just go do the damn right thing and follow what the people that we're supposed to trust tell us. And they didn't tell us the damn truth. And now your good friend, your workmate is no longer with us. And we've all lost people because of this shit. And I do want to get back to that question that Corona is not just the beer. Like, it sounds funny, but it's real. And how do you help people with your genetic testings to either recover from these spike proteins that are inside of them, or to have a better quality of life now that they're not healthy? Long COVID, if we will.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with long COVID. With
It
genetic
just means
testing,
vaccine injury, guys.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. I usually look at some of the main genes associated uh, with COVID issues and inflammation in general and long COVID. There's a bunch of them. I mean, if you look in the literature, you'll find them the same as I do. There's like one called TYK2. There's the IL-6. There's a bunch of them. So what I do is I see if people have deficiencies in certain vitamins and minerals that can help. So if you have low vitamin C genetics, that's kind of a big deal. Then you take more. If you rule out oxalate sensitivity, then you could really ramp up the vitamin C. You don't want to give them, oxalic, kidney stones and different things. But if they don't have that issue, you can go 3, 4, 5 grams a day of vitamin C and N-acetylcysteine to balance it out. For selenium, some people have reduced selenium absorption, transport, and utilization. So if you have that, you can find out easily through genetics. If you have the low,
How do you get selenium?
you get it by Brazil nuts.
Brazil nuts.
I heard that's a myth
Which part?
that you get it from Brazil nuts. I heard that the crops of Brazil nuts are so they lack the nutrients and the density of it that's like an old wives' tale.
I don't know. It's interesting.
I looked at some recent studies, different food science, analyzing, and yeah, there is less selenium in Brazil nuts than there used to be, for sure.
Interesting.
But there's still
I think it's true. That's true with all foods, though, guys, is that if we go back to, studies that we were looking at nutrient density back in the 1930s, 1950s, I mean, with our, I don't know, it's monocrop, crappy farming practices everywhere in the world, nutrient density is lowering in all foods. So It's interesting, James, that you brought that up, because selenium can be very protective for folks with like Hashimoto's autoimmunity. There's a body of evidence showing that. But
where do you get it that's not synthetic?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's certainly there's selenium capsules that you can get, and products that are out there. But yeah, Brazil nuts can be, if they're high enough, be a boon to people trying to get selenium into the system. It's interesting about how much do you eat? Is it 4 big nuts? Is it 28 nuts? I don't know. That's a great question to get that therapeutic dose, if we're going to call it that, of selenium.
The problem with selenium is they do have certain lectins which can cause inflammation in some people.
Yeah,
that was my follow-up.
Yeah. So and nuts are hard, right? I mean, nuts are one of those more, we like nuts are, we're like, nuts are good and they're full of good fats and proteins and do all this great phytonutrient stuff.
Your body has to work in overtime to break that stuff down.
Yeah, nuts are hard. Nuts are hard on the body.
Yeah, for sure. And you could soak them, in for a few hours. Some of them, like, they sprout, pre-germinate. That can help. That can help with a lot of different nuts and seeds. But it's a big problem. So selenium's a big deal. Zinc is a big deal. Quercetin is a big deal. Quercetin is found in onions, but there's not enough. You're going to have to just take quercetin to get enough quercetin to actually. It's almost like an anti-aging supplement. Quercetin is. I kind of recommend it for most people. And those who say, oh, it reduces comp, so if you have low comp, don't take quercetin. That's a bunch of garbage. There's definitely research out there showing it doesn't inhibit comp that much unless you're taking like grams of it. So anything up to a gram a day, it's probably fine. And that's something that really helps, people with COVID, long COVID, other viral issues. Also andrographis paniculata. It's a really nice herb. Andrographis is great for modulating immune system, for reducing inflammation. I think it's an endosome alkalinizer, if I recall correctly. Really, really nice overall immune assistant.
So
Mm.
I know you just delivered a lot there, and I want this list because I think everybody's going to vitally have a better quality of life because of this. But the preemptively, should they take this genetic test with you to determine what supplements they need? So we're not just giving them like a shopping cart full of things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you take vitamin E and you have high COMT, it'll increase your risk of prostate cancer. So you shouldn't even be taking alpha tocopherol if you have high COMT.
So we don't want to guess with your health.
Yeah,
Right.
you want to know what you are. If you're high, medium, or low, you need to know that. If you're low, it'll reduce the risk of it. And if you're medium, it won't have much of an effect. But that's for alpha tocopherols.
But what I'm
If you
saying is
take
people
trienols, it actually improves everybody's health.
people shouldn't just say, "Hey, Dr. Val, send me an email with all the things that you just said because I want to go buy them all and put them in my
Right.
shopping cart and go get them off Amazon." Like, no,
Right.
they
First
should
of all,
come and
don't buy supplements off Amazon. No offense to Bezos. Thank you for delivering anything I need by 4 a.m. the next day. But I'm not recommending that.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
basically what I'm saying, Val, is do the test, find out what you need for supplementation and nutrition pathways, and get healthy the right way. We don't want to guess with your health. And that's why I believe bringing you on as a genetic expert was really important for our audience today, because they're probably going to have a lot of questions. And they're going to be like, well, damn, I just got a diagnosis from my cousin's brother that he has, my second cousin now has XYZ condition. And the guy that I work with, I just found out has XYZ with the prostate. Like, there's going to be things that people are going to like say, I need help. How do I get help? How do I get better faster? And I think that having you on today for this segment was an eye opener for me, because I got a chance to like get a really fundamental approach to telomeres, to predispositions, to the compound effect of you have this thing, you have this thing, you have this thing, you have this thing. How do we go the layers deep and find out who you really are? And how do we get clarity on that pathway? And I think it was just fascinating.
Just to recap, so for the lectin path, different lectins, some of the best lectins for breast cancer and some other cancers are escargot. That would be like a Helix pomatia agglutinin. Those actually kill cancer cells. Also, broad beans or fava beans, they're very anti-cancer. Different mushrooms, especially shiitake, reishi, enoki mushrooms, those actually have lectins in addition to the beta glucans. And yes, beta glucans is very important, but they have other compounds in there too. These are toxic to cancer cells. So I would say that's like some of the lectin pathway to address to help improve your odds.
And I heard that James needs to start eating mushrooms, because we tried to feed him mushrooms. We have morels that we harvested and dried, and he's like, no thanks. Let's not.
Well, there's a problem with mushrooms. Some people, it stimulates their immune system. Their immune system is already stimulated, and that's where I'm really glad Dr. Gundry, published his book, The Plant Paradox, and he did all this stuff with avoid lectins. I think that's all great because it sheds light on the issue. But I mean, let's just be honest. He doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. You're supposed to do reduce lectins to help with cardiovascular issues, but you're also supposed to increase some lectins for anti-cancer.
Yeah.
So he's looking at a very important part of health, which is the negative effects of certain pro-inflammatory lectins, and I appreciate that very much. But you have to balance that out. What if I run your genetics and you don't have a high risk of cardiovascular disease? What if your issue is cancer? And you're going to do a heart healthy diet?
Mm-hmm.
What a waste of money, and it's actually going to hurt you. You should be doing the anti-cancer diet.
That's
or what if you don't have either, but you have autoimmune issues? Well, then that's the issue you should be working on. Or what if you don't have this, you don't have that, but you have this other one? That's what you should be working on. So it's kind of like in Indiana Jones. They're digging in the wrong hole. Most people are digging in the wrong hole because they haven't done the work. They haven't looked at everything.
And the reason that they're digging in the wrong hole and don't have the answers is because, and again, I want to emphasize, general practitioners, primary care, ologists, They're not trained in any of this. Like I know the general public believes, they want to believe it, but the doctors just aren't trained in this. And this
Right.
is, I don't even, I hesitate to use this word. I was going to say this is cutting edge science. It is, except it's not like found yesterday. Like we've been known this stuff for a couple decades now, and it's been
It's
unfolding.
insane. Some of this information has been
Still
around
not
for
in the
10,
medical
20, 50, 70 years. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And yet your general doctor walking out of school that's 73 days, everything you learned is out of date. They're not even
Right.
learning the basics of this stuff other than to pass their boards, which is, what are the 4 combinations and how do they combine with each other and what's mRNA? I mean, that's like the depth of genetic testing, genetic quizzing for boards exams. It's paltry. And yet this is what everybody needs to know. And yet 99% of the doctors out there practicing don't know anything about what we're talking about. That's why it's so important to have you on the show.
Can I share a big secret and then I'll wrap this up?
Yeah.
There's no money in healthy people. And that's why we don't have a health revolution. That's why we have a sick care revolution. And that's why it's patch care and it's not preventative care. And there's no real cures and there's no real solutions. And that's why we have to go and look at who we are individually and be the number one doctor in the world, the one inside of us.
Yeah.
Dr. Val, or not doctor yet.
Soon to be
doctor.
Candidate.
Last 2 topics. You're doing a lot of speaking. Are you enjoying that? Getting out there and speaking at the different A4Ms and the different health coalition groups that you're being invited to speak at?
Yeah, I really like it. It's a great honor and a privilege, and it's not so much me going out there and disseminating information, and partially it's that, and partially when I go to these different conferences, I meet people and I make new connections, and I try to learn as much as I can. So I don't really feel like an expert, and in fact, that should be a telltale sign. If someone calls themselves an expert, they're not really an expert because of Dunning-Kruger. And I have this theory on Dunning-Kruger called successive Dunning-Kruger fallacies. So Dunning-Kruger is, you think you know it all, and then you have this valley of despair where you realize you know nothing, and then you slowly get some information, and now you feel more comfortable. Well, I think you have to go through multiple Dunning-Krugers because the valley is way deeper than you ever thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, for everybody that doesn't know what Dunning-Kruger is, what is that?
Dunning-Kruger is the idea that people who don't have much knowledge on a subject think they know it a lot better than they do. And then once they realize they don't know just about anything on the subject, only then does real learning start.
It's the opposite of imposter syndrome. People that don't know what imposter syndrome is, a lot of us that know a whole lot about a lot of stuff, the deeper we get, the more, even though we know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff, we also realize there's a lot more that we don't know, because we are aware of that. And so a lot of us have imposter syndrome. Like, well, I know a whole lot, but there's a whole lot more to know. Whereas the Dunning-Kruger, they don't know a whole lot, but they're pretty freaking confident in what they think they know. And they come across sometimes as authorities, and sometimes they wear white coats. Oftentimes they wear white coats, in fact.
Nice. True.
And a last closing question, and then I'll do a nice outro for us. Tell us a success story.
Oh, yeah.
Share with us something that you've seen over your life that you've had your hands on and your knowledge into and your skills into, that you've seen somebody's life turn around.
Oh, sure. There was a lady I was working with. This was at a mental health clinic I was consulting at. She came to me. She was on 13 different medications. Her triglycerides were 600. Her blood sugar was 280. Everything was bad that was going on. I told her, here are some different life strategies as far as diet, exercise, lifestyle, supplements, foods. I gave her a food list. She went against my wishes and the nurse practitioner working with us, and she decided And if she's listening right now, she knows exactly who she is. um, she decided, I'm just going to get off all my meds, which is not something that I recommended, not something that the NP recommended, but she pretty much got off of everything and then reduced her metformin dose by half. And that was her deciding to do this. Within 1 month, her triglycerides went from 600 to 200. Her fasting blood sugar went from, I don't know where it was, 200 something, 260, 280. It went down to about 130, 140. She wasn't obese, just a little bit overweight, but not really. Everything went better. She started thinking better. Within 3 months, she was a totally new person. Now, it doesn't usually happen that fast, and I don't recommend getting off of everything at once because there's some risks involved if you do that. But that had to have been like one of the most dramatic, like, how the heck did this happen? Like, I don't understand. So yeah, that would have been one of them. I wanted to say something else too before we got off.
That was my next question. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to share with us before we close out today?
Yes. So for people who don't have a lot of information, I would just say, just get labs, standard labs that your doctor can get you if you don't have a lot of money. Make sure you take a multi-mineral because, as Jason was saying, there's not a lot of minerals in the soil. It's been leached a little bit, so multi-mineral is important. Fish oil is important. Vitamin D is important. Some iodine or kelp is important, unless you have Hashimoto's. Magnesium is like just in the toilet. There's not much magnesium. Back in the old days, 100 years ago, everybody had 400 or 500 milligrams a day. It was just in the soil. Now everyone's getting like 200 or 300 milligrams a day, and it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, eat more fruits, vegetables, and nuts. Of course, have more fiber. As far as whether to avoid wheat and corn, I would at least reduce wheat and corn, and I would try to reduce animal fats and eat leaner meats and fish. If you have enough money, get the genomics test. Can I share them my website?
We're going to share it. So go ahead.
Okay. It's just geneticwellbeing.com. That's where you can order the testing with me. And I put in there a discount code, Get Better Faster 40. So it gives 40% off.
Oh, nice.
Until I think throughout the week.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Until
That's
Sunday
awesome. So
I
love that. And thank you for sharing that. And I know James is going to wrap us up here, but I just want to say this, 2 things. Number one, I had 16 questions prepared for us. We got through 2 or 3. So I think this clearly leads to like, let's have you back on. But I have a proposition for the back on. I'd like for James and Rachel and I to go through what is it, geneticwellbeing.com? Is that what that was?
Yeah.
And do this testing and get your analysis. And then when you come back on, we don't have to do the whole show of, walk me through my genes. But I think that it would be cool for our listeners to kind of experience that. We did that with Mandy Keene with understand.me, and she basically did our personality profiles and nailed us. Like, it was weird. It was fun. It was a cool show. I'd love to have you back on and do that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And also to address the other 13 plus questions that I have, so I mean, as we were talking earlier before we got on in the green room, I told Val, I'm like, sometimes we get to the end of the interview, we're like an hour and a half, 2 hours in, and we're like ramping up to like other questions. If that's the case, we'll invite you back on. That's where we are, Val. So I'm going to invite you back on. We're gonna have a lot of fun. So thank you for this interview today. I just want to say thank you for your time and everything.
You got it. No problem.
Yeah. And Dr. Jason, thank you for helping co-host this amazing Get Better Faster episode today. And Val, thanks for being so generous with your knowledge and your time.
Hey, I know this was great. I can see now, having gone through the full interview process, why this podcast is successful, and it's going to be even more so. I could see it.
Thank you.
There's a synergism, and it's also a real. It's a big difference between someone who is cool and puts on a smile and doesn't seem maybe as real versus people who are like 100% dedicated and they're going in a direction of I like to say truth, love, and there was another one too. Truth, love. Anyway, it'll come to me.
Listen, I appreciate that. Thank you. I will say that there's
And
so
peace.
much.
That's the one.
Thank you.
Yeah,
There's so much
peace.
work. There's so much work that goes into a show that I didn't even know about. I had and I think Val, you were on my previous iteration, which was the Guerrilla Health Radio, right? Which I think we had 8 episodes because it's so hard to actually make a good podcast. We're so blessed to have James from Cairo Hustle that approached us back in November, December to put this together. We're so blessed to have his hustle team. We're so blessed to have our executive producer, Rachel, that literally is working diligently behind the scenes, pulling this all together so that James and I can get on camera and smile and look cool and do our job. But we are deeply passionate about it. I say constantly, I can't wait until I can dance a jig on the grave of modern American medicine. I can't wait. So I'll turn it back over to you guys. But thank you again, Val. And thank you, James, for you guys' kind words.
Yeah, the affirmative closure. Val, it's been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your groundbreaking work with our audience and giving a glimpse into the future of personalized medicine based on the gene sequencing. For everyone listening, you can find Val and learn more about his genetic protocols and get 40% off for the end of the week at geneticwellbeing.com. That's geneticwellbeing.com and put Get Better Faster as the code in. I think it's Get Better Faster 40, and you'll get 40% off of that test, which I think is invaluable to anybody. So go over there right now. If you're watching this on replay, I would just urge everybody to send this to a friend or family member that needs what is going on. Even if you're a millionaire, money doesn't matter if you don't have your health. And there's an old saying that the man with his health has a million dreams, the man without has one. So let's get you healthy. But we'll have a link in the show notes along with your social media handles so people can dive deeper into your life-changing information. And to all of our amazing audience, our Get Better Faster Nation, GBF Nation, thank you for listening and being a part of this journey towards getting people better faster. The best way you can show your support is simple. Share this episode with somebody who needs to hear this message, whether it's a friend struggling with their health, a family member who's tried everything, or someone who's ready to unlock the genetic blueprint for optimal health within them. This information could literally be life-changing. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and get all of the updates and the behind-the-scenes tomfoolery that we share. Until next time, keep getting better faster. Val, Jason, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Love y'all.
Bye for now.
Bye.